Hello, I'm Darkwell, Bled, and welcome back to Beyond the Rusted Gate. Today's short story combines two of my biggest fears, monsters and working in retail. I give you Cleanup in Aisle 3. Amanda sat on the counter in silence. The sun would rise soon and the morning staff would start to arrive, but she knew they would be too late. There was nowhere to go, and there was nowhere to run. Amanda closed her eyes and thought back to how it all had started. The night had begun slowly and seemed no different to any other midnight shift at bargain sales before it. In a town so small as theirs, it was uncommon for them to have patrons at such a late hour. Were it not for the fact that their store was part of an international chain whose rules and opening time showed bureaucratic indifference towards the needs of the location, they would surely stay open no later than 6 p.m. As it was, this was not the case, and so from 11 p.m. onwards, the skeleton staff of the small grocery store were visited by few, mainly drunks either heading to or leaving the town's nearby pub. It had just turned 2 a.m. and Bethany, a member of the floor staff, had gone on her break. Amanda was manning the counter, Raymond, the manager, had not been seen for at least 40 minutes, and Mickey was taking the unnecessary time to make sure all labels were facing forwards while putting out stock. There were only 4 members on from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. and the store was almost entirely silent. They had long since turned off the in-store jingles and all that could be heard was the soft tap, tap, tap of Mickey placing cans of beans onto the shelves. 20 minutes passed. It had so far been an uneventful evening. There were still no customers and Amanda was attending to her nails and Mickey was working with purposeful sluggishness, knowing that, as there was so little stock to put out, if he were to complete his task, he would be left with nothing else to do. Vaguely, Mickey was aware of the sound of 2 automatic doors sliding open at the front of the store and of the footfalls that stumbled through. He was, however, not bothered by them. Customer service was Amanda's job, and he was, after all, on his knees unloading cans of beans. Amanda did look up from her task, but still said nothing. She watched as the man dragged his feet into the store with a directionless trudging. He walked as though he were an extra in a George Romero film. She couldn't tell if it was tragic or comedic and decided it was probably both. The man had a vacant expression, could barely walk, and smelt like a 2 days dead rat stuck in the wall on a summer's day. Amanda breathed a sigh of contempt, knowing that this was something she would have to deal with. In silence, she watched him lumber past the counter, hoping that he would simply realize that this was not the pub and just go home. But when he started to moan loudly, she decided it was time for action. "Mickey," Amanda pleaded whingingly, looking from the man to the stock boy. Mickey, despite hearing this, gave no response. If she really needs my help, she can walk over and ask, he thought. "Mickey," she pleaded again. He continued to ignore her and continued to stack beans. "Mickey," she said, this time shouting. "What?" Mickey finally yelled in response. "We've got another one," she said dramatically. "So?" he responded with indifference. "So make him leave," she cried. The man was clearly off his head and gave no response, verbal or otherwise, to this back and forth. Mickey sighed heavily. It was the company's unofficial policy that the night crew had several male staff members in order to prevent theft and remove undesirables. This rule, unofficial or otherwise, had never made sense to Mickey, a 19-year-old stick insect of a boy who would never be described by anyone as the muscle. It also annoyed him that he was expected to do what wasn't in his job description and work as security without receiving a paycheck for it. "Get Raymond," he responded pointedly, not looking up from the shelf of beans he was restocking. "Raymond is taking a dump," she shot back, annoyed. Despite being their manager, Raymond was not much older and not much more competent than either of them. On a slow night shift, equipped with a cell phone capable of playing games and watching movies, well, Raymond was always, quote-unquote, taking a dump. "Raymond's always taking a dump," Mickey grumbled. The intruder, moving again, swayed his way past the counter and stumbled halfway towards the aisle in which Mickey was crouched. Suddenly, the man began to whine and moan loudly, causing Mickey to jump. "Please, Mickey, he's drunk and it's making me uncomfortable," Amanda whined from the counter, taking the time to draw out the last word. She was complaining loudly enough for Mickey to hear, and yet seemingly went completely unnoticed by the man. Mickey sighed again and, wiping his hands on his black nylon pants, stood up to assess the situation. It had never really been Mickey's intention not to kick the man out. He had done it countless times before, and usually with very little altercation. More often than not, they would just insist that they were here to buy a snack, and once escorted from the chip aisle with more salted goods than any one man should consume in a single sitting, left without further fuss. Still, regardless of how many times he had to do it and how little issue it usually was, Mickey didn't intend to ever do it without at least a facade of protest. He figured that, as it wasn't in his job description, then he'd better make a show of doing it lest they begin to expect it of him without thanks. The interloper groaned again, and Mickey finally turned to him and was shaken by what he saw. The man was horribly pale. His eyes were sunken deep into his head, and the whites of them had turned a dark yellow. They jittered in place as though they were unable to focus on any one thing. He smelled bad, real bad, and as well as his groaning, there was from within him, despite his jaw being locked shut and firmly set, a strange noise like chattering teeth. Cold sweat ran down Mickey's spine. This guy was obviously far gone, off his face on some sort of substance. Mickey had heard stories from an older stockboy of the time a meth head had trashed the store. It had taken 3 of them to fight him off, and one had ended up in hospital. Mickey was just here for beer money while he went through university, and he had no desire to be beaten senseless by a druggie. He swallowed the lump in his throat dryly and attempted to find a safe, non-confrontational way to request the man to sod off. He eventually eloquated. At this, the man began to shake, shakes which quickly turned into shivers and then into impossibly fast vibrations before the man fell backwards, hitting the hard-tiled floor with a sickening thwack and becoming still. The moment the man had connected with the floor, his odor had instantly worsened, and a loud hiss like steam escaping a valve was heard. The smell was rank with thickness, and Mickey threw up on the shelved beans. "What happened? Whoa, are you okay?" Amanda asked, coming over. Mickey was still dry-heaving at the smell and recovered only enough to wipe the spittle from his mouth with his sleeve and yell for Amanda to call an ambulance and for Bethany to get off her break and to bring over the first aid kit. Fighting to regain composure, he pulled his shirt over his nose in an attempt to mask the smell and began to inspect the man closely. He was surely dead, Mickey thought, noting in disgust the large crack that ran down the side of his head, showing bone beneath and blackness within. There was no blood, but Mickey was unsure whether this was a bad sign or a good sign, remembering that once, when he had cut his fingers badly enough for stitches, it hadn't bled at all for the first few seconds of the injury. Mickey's inspection was cut off when Bethany ran over with the first aid kit. "Figures we get this crap while I'm having my dinner," she muttered, annoyed. "I'm not counting this as part of my break," she added. "I think he's dead," said Mickey. "Are you a doctor?" Bethany responded sarcastically. "Are you?" Mickey cruelly shot back. Bethany blushed with hurt and anger as Mickey's comment hit its target directly. He knew full well that had she not failed her last semester of university, she would indeed be on the road to becoming a doctor, but an almost doctor was not a doctor. "I will be by this time next year," she muttered under her breath before checking the dead man's lack of pulse. "Whoa, I think he is dead," she agreed. Suddenly, the door to the bathroom slammed open, causing both Bethany and Mickey to jump. "Who's dead? What the hell?" Raymond demanded, drying his hands on the back of Mickey's shirt. Suddenly, his face twisted as the smell hit him like a physical wall. "Jesus! What's that?" he coughed, clasping his own shirt to his face. Mickey quickly caught both Raymond and Bethany up on the situation, pointing out the crack in the man's head and theorizing that it was that which had killed him. "Well, are any of you chuckleheads going to call a damn ambulance?" Raymond diligently demanded. "Little too late for that," replied Bethany. "He's dead, you see," added Mickey. Raymond blinked twice. "Right, sure, but then call the police," Raymond suggested instead. As their discussion carried on, Amanda moved down to join them, store phone in hand. "No luck on the ambulance, the call wouldn't go through," she reported. "He's dead, Amanda. An ambulance won't help him. Call the police," Raymond ordered. "It's the same number, Raymond," Amanda spat back. Raymond swore and began pacing. When he had been given the job of a night shift manager 2 months earlier, he had been told it was a tremendous responsibility, and had been asked if he was sure he was up to the task. At the time, he had assured the store manager that he could handle it, and now there was a smelly corpse laying in front of his beans aisle. "That number should never be down, Amanda. Are you sure you dialed it correctly?" questioned Bethany. "It's 3 zeros, Bethany. It isn't exactly complex math," Amanda replied sarcastically. "Well, there was that one time on the register when," began Bethany, planning to bring up a particularly embarrassing memory, when the strange chattering began anew. When you, she tried to continue. "Where is that coming from?" she said, giving up on her dig. "I think it's coming from him," Mickey said, motioning towards the dead body. "He was doing it before," Mickey trailed off. "Before he died," Amanda said softly. Suddenly, the chattering went silent, and after a pause, a loud crack rang out that sounded as if someone was shelling an especially large peanut, and the smell worsened. Bethany, still kneeling beside her patient, uttered a befuddled, "What?" before scampering backwards into the shelving behind her. A moment later, those that were standing all took an involuntary step backwards as the crack in the man's head widened. It was like watching a chicken be born of a rotten egg. The crack in the skull lengthened and led to further cracks that pushed outwards and were barely, and sometimes not at all, held on by thin, struggling strips of skin, which tore and once torn allowed fractured bone to fall to the floor. There was no blood that came from the man's head, just black mush even as the skull fell open. For a moment, no one was sure what they were looking at. Then, from the shattered skull, a long, spindly stalk shot forth. Slow and quivering, it was followed by several more stalks that, as they extended, pushed away further parts of the skull and further widened the hole in what was once a man's face. These stalks found their place and bent and latched on fast to the surrounding head. They bowed inwards, and from their middle, to which they joined, rose a central mass, an arachnid-like torso encased in a crustaceous outer shell. The creature was black in color, eyeless, eight-legged like a spider, had two additional feelers like an insect, and was covered in a thick textured carapace like a crab. Once fully emerged, it jolted from the man's skull with impossible speed and left behind nothing but a hollowed-out black bowl where once the man's brain had sat. The creature skidded on the smooth-tiled floor, ran directly into a fixture, and then disappeared behind the aisle's long shelving. "Christ in a cupcake! What the hell was that?" Raymond shouted. "I'm getting the hell out of here," Bethany stated. She stood, walked towards the glass door, and screamed. Beyond the automatic doors and along the glass-walled front of the store, dozens of further creatures could be seen scuttling about. Somewhere in the distance, briefly illuminated by the streetlights across the road, and others could be seen more clearly, illuminated by the light of the store. Several ran aimlessly into the glass front of the store or into the doors, only to dart off in separate directions. Luckily, they appeared to be either too light or too small to cause the automatic doors to open, but Raymond was taking no chances. The creatures might not be able to open the doors, but those infected by them certainly could. Quickly, in an attempt to prevent any more of these creatures or their carriers from making it inside, he ran over with the manager's key he had hung around his neck, and both disabled the door's sensors and locked them. Mickey then slowly approached the locked doors and closely examined one of the strange creatures that ran against them. It had dark yellow-orange markings across its back like many poisonous creatures do. Its crustaceous outer shell looked hard, and its legs looked sharp. "Wouldn't want to step on one of these bastards," Mickey observed. Responded Bethany quietly. "There's still one of those things in here," Amanda said with concern. "It came from inside his head," Bethany whispered, looking towards the aisle and the body. It was fairly clear that the situation was dire and that the creature was dangerous. Things that are good for human mortality don't generally burst from their skulls, and so it was only with effort that they somewhat managed to regather their wits, arm themselves with brooms, and sit on the raised safety of the front counter to discuss their next move. "We can't call the police and we can't leave," Amanda reported. They had now tried their cell phones and once more got a busy signal. As she spoke, they saw the creature scuttle out from under the aisle, bang into a chocolate bar stand, change direction, and then scuttle behind another. "They don't appear to be especially bright," Mickey noted. "We should catch it," suggested Raymond. "We should stay the hell away from it," retorted Mickey, Amanda quickly agreeing with a whisper of yes. "It may be a new species. If we catch it, there might be money in it," said Raymond. "It exploded out of a guy's head," replied Mickey, entirely unconvinced. Suddenly, like an elastic band snapping, Bethany seemed to come out of her daze. "I'll help catch it," she offered brightly to the stunned silence of the others. No one gave a further response for a few seconds. Mickey looked from the creatures outside the window to the corpse down the aisle and shuddered at the sound of movement somewhere in the store. "Well, you can count me out," he said definitively. "Uh-huh," agreed Amanda. Bethany turned to regard them. Knowing it would be far more difficult for her and Raymond to catch it alone, she attempted to mount her argument. "Look, this thing did come from that guy's head, and it could be some kind of new species. I mean, I've never seen anything like that before. Maybe it's a kind of parasite or something that no one has ever heard of, one that grows in people's brains and then kills them and then spreads." In truth, Bethany didn't really want to put herself in danger, nor did she care about Raymond's hope for a reward. Not that she would turn one down if it were offered, but instead figured that capturing such a creature, one completely unknown to medical science, would be a feather in the cap of her currently unimpressive academic career. It may even force her professors to allow her to return to university following the unfortunate plagiarism misunderstanding that had seen her expelled last semester. "Well, if it's a brain parasite, then I'm definitely out. I'm not getting exposed to a brain parasite, not for minimum wage," responded Mickey. "Sure," agreed Bethany amicably. Unless we are already exposed, for all we know, we might be. Maybe it spreads by that smell we smelled. Maybe we inhaled some airborne particles or whatever. Who knows? And if we are exposed, then not capturing it could be a death sentence, and capturing it may be our only chance of a diagnosis, she reasoned. Yes, exactly, agreed Raymond. Plus, reward, he added. Before either Mickey or Amanda could give an answer, their thoughts were interrupted by a loud clash in the third aisle, signaling that the creature had knocked over the dog food stand. Bethany and Raymond rushed towards the disruption with brooms in hand, and Mickey reluctantly trailed behind. They arrived in the aisle just in time to see the creature run headlong into another fixture before darting off in another direction. They're blind, Mickey noted aloud. Yeah. Hey, yeah, I think you're right, agreed Bethany. If they're blind, they should be easy to catch, reasoned Raymond. The creature re-emerged from under the store's fixtures once more, this time going towards the back left corner of the store, where, due to the freezer units for food and drinks, there was nothing under which it could conceal itself. It bounced between the two walls that made up the corner as if it were a Roomba caught in a loop, and Raymond and Bethany slowly began to approach it from either side, with Mickey hanging far back between them. What are you going to do from back there? Yelled Raymond. Stay alive, Mickey thought, but instead said, cut off its escape when it gets past you two. Raymond grumbled something about cowards and slackers, and then, having drawn close enough to the creature, brought the broom head down hard upon it. Until the broom connected with the creature, it had been facing towards the wall, but on connection it quickly swiveled to face Raymond and began making the same strange clicking noise they had heard emanate from within the dead man's head. Raymond froze, the broom still resting on top of the creature, unsure how he should proceed, and uncertain why he believed a broom would stop or stun a creature that was covered in a protective shell. Raymond, mate, maybe we should regroup and rethink this, suggested Mickey. Raymond moved to answer him, but upon opening his mouth, the creature exploded outwards with a thick pollen-like cloud which made its way into his mouth, eyes, and nose. Raymond began to sneeze and cough uncontrollably, rubbing at his eyes with the back of his hand. The creature sat entirely motionless as he did this, but the moment Raymond had recovered enough to cast a glance towards Bethany, he saw from the corner of his eyes the creature dart towards her. Mickey, Bethany, and Raymond all immediately legged it, running back towards the counter with the intention of climbing on top of it and joining Amanda in her safety. The creature, without effort, caught Raymond, but seemingly kept pace with him rather than overtaking. Despite the blur in his eyes and the sting in his throat from the strange pollen explosion, he attempted to push on faster and harder, trying in vain to outrun the small spider crab-like monster. He rubbed at his eyes, managing to clear the blur from his left eye just in time to see the creature dart out from beside him, launch itself into the air, and slash Bethany's throat with one of its razor-sharp carapaced legs. There was no hope nor attempt to save Bethany's life. A fountain of blood erupted and her head fell backwards, only remaining connected to her torso by a thin slither of skin. She crumbled to the floor in silence, her blood puddled, and she was beyond the realm of medical assistance. It is doubtful that she would feel consoled by the fact that her death and the creature's subsequent feeding on her corpse had given the other three a chance to escape. Amanda, Mickey, and Raymond did not waste the opportunity and sprinted the distance of the store back down the aisles, locking themselves into the break room. Within the break room, they felt secure, or at least as secure as they could possibly feel within the store. None of the rooms were exactly airtight, as in a cheap attempt to air-condition the entire building with only one unit, neither the bathrooms nor the break room's walls were entirely to the ceiling. Even so, with hopes that the creatures could not climb, they felt, at the very least, safer with a door between them. "Oh God, oh Christ in a cupcake," bumbled Raymond. "Screw your cupcakes," responded Mickey. "It killed Bethany. Oh my God." "Bethany is dead," Amanda said, awed. "Let's catch it, Mickey. There could be a prize in it, Mickey," Mickey angrily quoted. Raymond only moaned in response, a slow, painful moan of agony. "It killed Bethany," repeated Amanda, stunned. Raymond continued to moan loudly. Mickey looked awkwardly away from Raymond as he continued to moan. The situation was bad, and two people were dead, and now he felt bad for his manager. In a strange way, he hated Raymond for somehow making the situation about himself. Accidentally, while trying to avoid looking at Raymond, Mickey made eye contact with Amanda, who seemed to have now somewhat composed herself. The two of them held a gaze for an awkward few seconds, and Raymond continued to groan. Amanda darted her eyes from Mickey to Raymond and then back to Mickey, then whispered, "Say something." Mickey did not want to play counselor. He had his own problems to deal with, primarily the killer monster. "Come on, say something. He must feel terrible. Trying to catch it was his idea," she whispered. "He should feel bad," Mickey whispered back. Raymond's anguished moans continued, and after a pause, Amanda finally attempted to console Raymond herself. Raymond, it isn't entirely your fault, she tried. It sort of is, Mickey cut in, which received an annoyed stare from Amanda, who, despite thinking he may be right, didn't think such criticism at this time was helpful. No, she said forcefully, before relaxing her voice into more of a cooing. You were just doing what you thought was right, she soothed. He groaned louder and began to yell out in a painful cry. Come on now, you can't blame yourself for a wild animal attack, she reassured him. No, it's not that. Well, it's that also, but... He groaned further. There's something wrong with my head, he cried. You're telling me, Mickey commented, but then casting his mind back to the strange spore explosion, began to wonder if Raymond hadn't received some kind of poisoning from it like Bethany had suggested they might. His eyes had begun to redden, and he was perspiring heavily, and he was continuing to groan. Groan like the other man had. I think he might actually be really sick, Mickey reluctantly admitted. He looks like he's in a lot of pain. Yeah, agreed Amanda. Do you have Panadol? Mickey asked. She didn't. Mickey shifted uncomfortably and Raymond moaned louder. I'm going to go to the medicine aisle and get some help, Mickey finally said with a reluctance. You're crazy. That thing will kill you, Amanda objected, grabbing his arm. If we don't quiet him, it'll hear us. Come here and do that anyway, he responded. Not if we just keep the door shut, she countered. You saw how fast it moves, and it jumps. Who's to say it can't climb? And if it can, it'll just come over the top of the wall, reasoned Mickey. Amanda said nothing in response but let go of his arm. I'll be quick, he assured her. Just wait here with Raymond, he added. I'm not staying with him, she hissed more harshly than she had intended, and then drawing closer to Mickey, added in a hushed whisper, He's acting like the guy that came in. I'm worried he'll... well, you know. Mickey did know and nodded slowly. Fine, come, but we have to be fast and quiet, he replied before turning to Raymond and offering, Just hang in there. We'll be back in a moment. Raymond groaned loudly, but not necessarily in response. They made their way swiftly out of the break room, carefully shutting the door behind them, and moved towards the medicine aisle, scoring an unfortunate view of Bethany's corpse as they passed. She had had her abdomen torn open, and her organs and flesh were scattered about. Most of it was missing. From the corpse, bloody 8-legged footprints could be seen to wander off in zigzags. The footprints backtracked, retraced their steps, and then went off again. Look, Mickey said, pointing out the random scatterings. I think it's blind again, he postulated. It wasn't blind when it killed Bethany, Amanda hissed back. No, it wasn't, agreed Mickey. They quickly retrieved the pills as well as a handful of other items they thought may prove useful. Then they stealthily made their way back towards the break room, but, upon clearing the final aisle before it, were disheartened to find the door standing open and Raymond outside slumped against the wall, vomiting. Raymond, mate, you shouldn't be out here, Mickey said, grabbing him and dragging him back into the small break room. I didn't feel so good, he slurred with a drunken tongue. You don't look so good, Amanda agreed, handing him the Panadol and a bottle of water to wash it down. Raymond accepted both the items gratefully. His eyes were no longer red, but had instead dulled to a dark yellow, and his skin had become white and pasty. Beyond the acidic stench of vomit that could be smelt on his breath, there was also a dull background odor of rot slowly becoming discernible. Amanda was about to ask if the Panadol had helped, but before she had the chance, she saw movement out of the corner of her eye and ducked just in time to avoid the lunge of the creature, which evidently had entered the break room when the door had been left open. Overshooting its target, the creature skidded, then quickly turned and once more launched itself off the ground, this time in the direction of Mickey, who too only just dodged it. They burst out of the room, pulling Raymond along as best they could. The creature followed. Raymond staggered, tripped, and proving too heavy for Mickey and Amanda, fell, knocking himself unconscious on the tiled floor. The creature, having launched itself from somewhere behind them, this time overshot all three, connected hard with a fixture, fell to the ground and darted off in its earlier zigzag motions, bumping into things as it went. It's blind again, Mickey commented more to himself than to Amanda. They each took an arm and dragged Raymond into the nearby bathroom, closing the door behind them. Raymond's smell had worsened significantly, and despite him occasionally twitching, a check of his pulse confirmed he was dead. There was a subtle noise, like the chattering of teeth that emanated from his corpse. He's dead, Mickey reported as calmly as he could. Dead also, Amanda commented. Yes, agreed Mickey. That man dead, Bethany dead, Raymond dead, Amanda listed mechanically. What do we have? Mickey asked, trying to change the subject as best he could. Amanda took stock of their supplies and in the same mechanical manner listed Panadol, 1 water bottle, some bandage wrap. "Good," responded Mickey, unsure what else he should say. They then dragged Raymond's body into a toilet stall and were glad that its door went almost entirely to the floor. Only seconds after they had gotten him into the stall, the sickening nutshell crack could be heard, followed by a hiss, and the putrid odor of rotten meat could be smelt. Then they heard the scampering of small legs. Mickey pulled himself up to look over the stall door. "What are you doing?" hissed Amanda. Mickey didn't respond directly, instead commenting, "It's blind. This one can't see either." Amanda pulled herself up beside him and watched. It scampered around the cubicle and even partially up the wall and door, but undeniably moved without purpose or direction. The other one was blind until it wasn't, warned Amanda, cautiously lowering herself back to the ground. The other one was blind until it was near Raymond, until he, well, Mickey trailed off. "Died," finished Amanda. "Yeah, that," agreed Mickey. He paused to gather his thoughts, then began again. "I think they maybe see through the eyes of the infected, like natural Wi-Fi or something. They use our eyes to see," he offered awkwardly, expecting Amanda to shoot him down. To Mickey's surprise, she didn't. In a horrific way, it all made perfect sense to Amanda. The idea of a creature infecting another and using its senses wasn't that much more far-fetched in her mind than other things in nature she had heard of, such as hive minds and pack mentality, and she had always been a believer in extrasensory activity. Perhaps this was a creature that had evolved to enhance such things in those it infected, only to then take advantage of them. "It was blind before it sprayed him with that pollen. That must be how it infects and spreads," she agreed. "Well, neither of us had better get infected, then," Mickey stated. They sat on the floor of the bathroom beneath the sink and watched the stall doors. With the first creature still unaccounted for and the second within the stalls, their place was only safe relative to the complete exposure of the store floor. Even then, the creature had shown itself capable of launching great distances and climbing, and so it was likely only a matter of time before this one either got out from the stalls or the other got in from the store. The odor of Raymond's corpse was of a spectacular stench, and on more than one occasion the creature scuttled up the back wall higher than the door height, and only through sheer luck redirected itself back into one of the 3 closed cubicles, rather than out into the general bathroom area. Amanda suggested they try relocating towards the break room, arguing that at least there was no creature within, and reasoning that it would not be difficult to evade the remaining creature as, if their theory held true, it was currently blind. Mickey instead suggested they make for the exit and try a proper escape, but was deterred from doing so when Amanda pointed out that the doors were locked, that the keys to open them were in the cubicle with Raymond, and that they had seen even more creatures outside. Reluctantly, Mickey agreed with Amanda and stood in order to make the attempt. He opened the bathroom door and took a deep breath, preparing for escape. His attempted calmness was, however, broken when, from behind them, the creature, having finally managed to clear the cubicles, dropped to the floor with a loud thwump. There was now no time to delay. They had to get out of this confined space of the bathroom and into the break room once more. With Amanda close behind, Mickey sprinted towards the break room and stepped through its doorway, only to place his foot directly down upon the hard outer shell of the first creature, which had evidently found its way within. On connection, it spored him with a sick odor that invaded his eyes, nose, and mouth. He grabbed Amanda's arm, and with his eyes closed, she ran him down the chips and nuts aisle. As he ran, Mickey fumbled with his free hand to wrap the medical bandage over his eyes so that the creature would not be able to use them to see. Before long, the 2 of them were sat on the main counter, Mickey blind, and Amanda watching as the 2 creatures randomly scuttled around the store. The sun would rise soon, and the morning staff, if they were coming at all, would start to arrive, but she knew they would be too late. Outside, in the increased brightness, she could still see countless more creatures scampering about. The stench of Bethany's blood mixed with the dull odor of rot permeating from Mickey, and together they smelt of the crypt. Occasionally, Mickey groaned and shuddered. Amanda had given him all the Panadol, but she could tell the pain was extreme. She knew she shouldn't stay, but she also knew there was no escape. Amanda had never really liked Mickey. Heck, she had never really liked any of her co-workers, but now, as it was just the 2 of them, she felt almost a tribal need to be there. She felt that he shouldn't be left to die alone, just as surely as she felt she shouldn't be allowed to either. The odor worsened, and Mickey began to wail in pain. The smell was spectacular, and Amanda could hear the strange chattering noise coming from within him. He thrashed, and he screamed, and he chattered, and in his agony he clawed at his own face and his skull and his eyes, and in doing so he threw off the bandages that covered them. The two of them, for a split second, made eye contact. His eyes were dark and jaundice yellow, and Amanda heard a loud sickening crack, followed by a hiss. Thanks for listening and Happy New Year. That was Clean Up in Aisle 3 from my second collection of short stories, Screams from Beyond the Crypt, which is available in paperback from most online distributors. If you enjoyed the story, consider subscribing for more stories every fortnight, and until then, I am Darkwell Bled.